JikookVerse family, welcome back to JikookVerse. Tonight, we are stepping away from the roar of the stage and heading somewhere much quieter, much more intimate, and honestly, much more fascinating: the hotel. After finishing their concert in Toronto, Jungkook and Jimin made their way to Chicago as the next stop in their busy tour schedule. The journey had been long, the days had been packed, and the energy of the previous performance was still lingering. But once the city lights began reflecting across the windows of their luxury hotel, the atmosphere changed completely. There was no screaming crowd inside the hotel hallway, no giant stage waiting for them, no countdown clock ticking toward the next performance. Instead, there was silence, soft lighting, the distant hum of the city, and two familiar figures finally getting a chance to breathe. And that is where tonight's story begins. The moment Jungkook and Jimin arrived at the hotel, the mood felt completely different from the intensity of the concert environment. Outside, Chicago was still alive. Cars moved through the streets, lights shimmered between buildings, and the city carried on at its usual fast pace. Inside, however, everything seemed slower. The luxury hotel had the kind of atmosphere designed to make people forget what time it was. The lobby was quiet, elegant, and softly illuminated, with polished surfaces reflecting warm lights. The kind of place where even footsteps seemed softer than usual. After a long trip, that kind of environment can feel almost unreal. Jungkook and Jimin had spent hours traveling, and the first priority was obvious: rest. Their schedules were still moving forward, and the Chicago concert was waiting for them. There was preparation to do, routines to maintain, and another major performance ahead. But before any of that, they needed a moment away from the pressure. And according to the atmosphere surrounding the hotel stay in our story tonight, that quiet moment became surprisingly memorable. Inside the room, the energy was no longer about performing. It was about recovering. Imagine the door finally closing. The hallway disappears. The outside world becomes distant. The noise of travel fades away. And suddenly, there is just a quiet room, soft hotel lighting, luggage resting near the entrance, and the calm that comes after an exhausting day. Jimin, known for the way he can bring warmth into even the smallest moments, would naturally fit into that softer atmosphere. Jungkook, meanwhile, has always carried a different kind of presence, sometimes quiet and focused, sometimes playful when he finally feels comfortable. Put those two energies together after a long travel day, and the atmosphere becomes impossible not to notice. There is something about seeing two people transition from performance mode into rest mode. On stage, everything is controlled. Every movement matters. Every expression can become a memory for thousands of fans. But inside a hotel room, the pace changes. The lights are lower. The conversation can be quieter, and the pressure to entertain disappears. That contrast becomes the heart of tonight's story. The room itself feels like a temporary little world separated from the chaos outside. The curtains are partly closed, leaving a narrow view of Chicago through the glass. The city lights stretch into the distance, creating a glowing backdrop beyond the room. For a moment, neither of them needs to say anything. They can simply sit, breathe, rest, and recover. After concerts, there is often a strange period when the body is exhausted, but the mind is still awake. Adrenaline does not always disappear immediately. Even when the performance has ended, the energy from the crowd can stay in your head. That would make the hotel room feel almost like a reset button. Jungkook could be settling into a quieter routine, perhaps checking his belongings, putting away items from the journey, and finally getting comfortable. Jimin could be doing the same, creating that familiar feeling of returning to a personal space after a very public day. The interesting part is how natural the silence becomes. There is no need for a stage, no need for dramatic entrances, no need for anything exaggerated. Just two people finally having room to relax, and then comes the detail that has everyone leaning closer to the screen. The beds. Two beds positioned side by side. close enough to make the room feel more connected than separate. Close enough that the distance between them becomes almost the entire conversation. Because when you hear the phrase, slept side by side, the first thing that comes to mind is not the room itself. It is the image. 2 beds, same room, late night, city lights outside, and a long day finally coming to an end. That is where the atmosphere becomes especially interesting. There is something incredibly peaceful about the idea of 2 exhausted performers finally lying down after everything they have been through. The concert, the travel, the noise, the schedules, the interviews, the constant movement, and then suddenly nothing, just quiet. Jungkook and Jimin lying down in a room overlooking Chicago while the city continues moving outside. The contrast is almost cinematic. While Chicago remains awake, the room becomes still. The curtains block much of the city brightness. The air conditioning creates a soft background sound. The hotel feels almost completely isolated from the outside world. And after a while, conversation becomes quieter too. Maybe they talk about the concert in Toronto. Maybe they mention a funny moment from the trip. Maybe they remember something that happened backstage. Maybe they simply sit there without saying much at all. Sometimes the strongest moments are the ones that do not need dialogue. One of the most beautiful parts of this hotel stay is the idea that exhaustion can make people more honest and more relaxed. When the cameras are gone, there is nothing to perform. When the audience is gone, there is no need to maintain a certain energy. When the stage lights disappear, even the smallest interaction can feel important. And that makes the hotel room feel like a completely different chapter. The night continues. Outside, Chicago glows. Inside, the room becomes quieter. The luggage remains untouched in certain places because resting suddenly feels more important than organizing everything. Phones may be placed on the table. Water sits nearby. Jackets are folded over chairs. And the beds remain only a few steps apart. There is also something comforting about the idea of familiar companionship after a long journey. Travel can be tiring in ways that are difficult to explain. Sometimes it is not the physical distance that exhausts you. It is the constant change in environment. New city, new hotel, new schedule, new stage, new room, new expectations. Having someone familiar nearby can make that transition easier. And that is what makes the atmosphere between Jungkook and Jimin so compelling in this story. They do not need a grand moment. They already have the comfort of familiarity. Perhaps there is a brief laugh before they settle down. Perhaps someone says good night. Perhaps one of them checks the clock and realizes how late it has become. Then the room becomes quiet again. The Chicago skyline continues glowing beyond the curtains. And eventually, the 2 beds become still. That is where the title of tonight's story becomes even more intriguing. Jungkook and Jimin sleeping side by side, not because the night needs drama, not because something extraordinary has to happen, but because after a long and demanding journey, simple companionship can become the most meaningful part of the night. There is something almost nostalgic about the image. 2 friends in a quiet hotel room, a major city outside, another concert waiting in the morning, and a few precious hours of rest in between. As the night gets later, the atmosphere becomes even softer. The room is mostly dark now. Only a little light comes through the curtains. The city is still visible, but the sounds feel far away. Everything has slowed down. And perhaps that is the real luxury of the hotel stay. Not the expensive furniture, not the skyline view, not the polished interior. The real luxury is having a few hours where nothing is required. No performance, no interviews, no cameras, no expectations, just rest. For Jungkook and Jimin, the night before another concert would naturally be important. Recovery is part of the job. Sleep is part of preparation. Keeping the body and mind ready can be just as important as rehearsing another song. So the room becomes a place of preparation without feeling like preparation. Rest itself becomes part of the tour. The hotel bed becomes part of the routine. The quiet becomes part of the routine, and the presence of someone familiar nearby becomes part of the comfort. As the night continues, the idea of side-by-side rest feels less dramatic and more peaceful. It is not about what happens. It is about what does not happen. Nothing interrupts the silence. Nothing breaks the calm. The room stays still. The city keeps moving. And two exhausted performers finally get the chance to sleep. Perhaps Jungkook falls asleep first. Perhaps Jimin stays awake a little longer. Perhaps one of them notices the other has already drifted off and quietly turns off the remaining light. Those small details are what make a hotel night feel real in the mind of the viewer, because we can all understand that feeling. The moment after a very long day when you finally realize you do not have to do anything else. You can close your eyes. You can relax, and you can let the day disappear. For Jungkook and Jimin, this part of the Chicago stop feels especially calm after the intensity of Toronto. The previous concert may have been filled with music, shouting, lights, and movement, but the hotel offers the exact opposite: silence, warmth, privacy, stillness, and perhaps that is why this particular night feels so memorable. The city itself becomes part of the story. Chicago is famous for its energy, but from a high hotel room late at night, the city can look surprisingly peaceful. Traffic moves like tiny streams of light. Buildings glow in the darkness. Windows sparkle from one tower to another, and from above, everything feels distant. Inside the room, time almost seems suspended. There is no rush. The next event will come eventually. The next rehearsal will come eventually. The next concert will come eventually. But for this one moment, none of that matters. The night belongs to rest, and that makes the side-by-side image even more powerful. Not because it needs to be interpreted as something complicated, but because it represents familiarity during one of the busiest periods of their lives. There is a quiet tenderness in simply knowing that two people can end a difficult day in the same peaceful space. The room does not need to be filled with conversation. Sometimes companionship is just knowing someone is there. As the hours pass, the hotel settles deeper into silence. The hallways become nearly empty. Elevators move less frequently. Voices disappear, and the room grows darker. Jungkook and Jimin are finally asleep. The long journey is over. The concert is behind them. The Chicago performance is still ahead, and for a few hours, nothing exists except rest. Then morning will eventually arrive. The curtains will open. The city will look different in daylight, and the quiet hotel room will once again become the starting point for another busy day. But tonight, before all of that, the most important thing is simply that they are resting. Side by side, in the same room, under the soft glow of Chicago at night, and there is something strangely beautiful about that simplicity. Fans often see Jungkook and Jimin surrounded by thousands of people. We see them on stages, in rehearsal spaces, in interviews, and during packed schedules. But a quiet hotel night gives us a completely different picture. It reminds us that behind the lights and performances are long travel days, tired bodies, sleepy eyes, and the basic human need to rest. That may be the most comforting part of this entire Chicago stay. Because after everything they give to the audience, there has to be a moment when they simply stop. And tonight, that moment happens in a quiet luxury hotel room. The world outside keeps moving, but inside, everything is still. Jungkook and Jimin have arrived. They have traveled far. They have finished another major chapter in Toronto, and now they are preparing for Chicago, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with sleep, with quiet, and with the comfort of familiar company. JikookVerse family, sometimes the biggest stories are not the loudest ones. Sometimes the most memorable moment is simply two people returning to a hotel after a long day, closing the door, turning down the lights, and finally getting some rest. That is the atmosphere surrounding tonight's Chicago stay. A city full of lights. A luxury hotel high above the streets. A quiet room after an exhausting journey. and two familiar faces finally away from the stage. As the night fades into early morning, the room becomes completely silent. The beds remain side by side. The city continues glowing beyond the glass, and the next chapter is already waiting. Jungkook and Jimin will wake up. They will prepare. They will return to the schedule. And eventually, they will step back into the spotlight once again. But before the music starts, before the crowd arrives, and before the Chicago night becomes a memory, there is this quiet moment. Two beds. One peaceful room. One long night of rest. And the unmistakable feeling that after the chaos of touring, sometimes the greatest luxury is simply having someone familiar nearby. This has been JikookVerse, and that was our look inside the quiet Chicago hotel night surrounding Jungkook and Jimin after their arrival from Toronto. Stay with JikookVerse for more stories, more moments, and more updates from the Jikook universe.